everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Tonight, I am very excited to welcome to the show Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram of the brand new United States Space Force. Lieutenant Colonel Fram is the president of SPARTA, or an organization that advocates and educates about transgender military service and is dedicated to the support and professional development of over 1,300 transgender service members. A member of SPARTA since 2014, she focuses on policy and advocacy work. Additionally, she provides educational briefings on transgender and diversity issues to military and civilian audiences. Lieutenant Colonel Fram came out as transgender on the day the transgender ban in the military was dropped in 2016. She is currently the highest-ranking out transgender officer in the Department of Defense. She is an active-duty astronautical engineer in the U.S. Space Force, currently assigned to the Pentagon to lead space policy integration for the Department of the Air Force. She previously served in a wide variety of Air Force positions, including a Research and Development Command position and an oversight role for all Air Force security cooperation activity in Iraq. Beyond that, she's also a published author. We will give her plenty of time to talk about her book. Everyone, please welcome to the show, Bree.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show to share your story, and I'm very excited to get into all of the different intricacies of what it's like to roll out a new entire branch of the military and your part in that.
Yeah, I'm excited to cover that and a whole host of other topics and see where we go.
So I like to start just the simple, how do you identify and what are your pronouns?
My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a transgender woman.
How did you choose your name?
My name was kind of a let's throw it against the wall and see what sticks conversation with my wife, where we had all sorts of ideas. And when the name Bree came out, I was like, yeah, that works. Well, that works for me too. Same first couple of letters as the name I was born with. So, I'm not as likely to be like, what? Who? Okay. As it was starting, that was important, to actually pay attention. But that was the name that worked for both of us.
Wonderful. I love that when, you try something out and it just sticks and works right from the start. That's great. Make sure if you like and, like being here, need community, need support, you go ahead and hit the follow button. Consider subscribing. It supports what we're doing here on the network, all of the shows we're putting together and all the other services that we've got that we're offering in the Transverse. More of those even to come this year. All right, getting back to you, Bree. When did you first realize that you were trans? What were those early signs for you?
Well, that's an interesting question because it's a question of language and identity, and I knew something was different about me from a very early age. I was Wonder Woman along with my sister for Halloween when I was 3 and 4. But to think of it as trans or as identity wasn't until much later in life. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I really started exploring my gender identity. And whether it was for a long time thinking of myself as a crossdresser, then as gender fluid, and then I'm sure we'll come to it, but then getting to that point of, you know what, if I don't take the step to transition, I'm limiting my development as a person and as a leader. And that was not too terribly long ago to make it to that point where I'm like, this is me, this is who I am, and unless I embrace it, I'm not getting to the place that I need to in all aspects of myself.
I really appreciate that. The thought that, this is affecting more than just me. If I'm not completely out and open and honest, then I'm not leading effectively. That's a really interesting take on that.
Yeah, that's been a big part of my journey and why I came out as trans publicly in the first place when the ban on transgender military service was first dropped in 2016. It was a lot about how can I utilize my position, my experiences, and where I'm at to support others. Because I could have waited a week or a month or maybe even a year or more. But to be out, to be public, to be an advocate that requires a lot of yourself. And if your whole self isn't in it, that's really hard. So there's been a number of places along the way where my identity has been important, but taking the steps to move towards it have been driven a lot by not just myself, but how can I help others move down the road and be their best selves?
Wow, that is great. And so what have you seen from that? Have you gotten any kind of feedback on that, and the fact that you being out has improved the lives or made it easier for any of your direct subordinates or anybody under them?
Yeah, I've had incredible feedback and support from not only the people that I have called, the leaders in my organization, my peers, but also for those that I've had the honor of leading. And when I did transition, and you show that additional level of vulnerability, even as a senior leader, that's a relatively rare trait in the military environment in particularly. But I think that's a really undervalued leadership trait: authenticity, and more particularly vulnerability, because it shows you're human. It shows a different side of you, and it shows a willingness to connect. So when I had several different people come to me with problems where they thought, hey, I can talk to you now, that was incredibly valuable, because as a commander, I can't help fix a problem that I don't know about. Mm-hmm. So leading in a way that enables and allows your folks to come to you with those issues that may be personal or that may be difficult to talk to is really important, because it enables you to work through it together and fix it.
That's incredible. Yeah, as I've been working this last year to start a company, I'm noticing it's really hard to do that. That's sort of my basic philosophy and tendency, is to be it feels like to overshare, and I feel the need a lot of times to kind of repress that and put on the stoic, strong face and all of that. And so it's really interesting, especially in a service where that is a major part of everything, that you've been able to break through that and find the way to show that vulnerability.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. And again, I think it comes down to that connection on a human level that I'm sure we'll talk about and you show in stories. It's that human connection, that little bit of vulnerability, and like, oh, that person's been through some things. They might be willing to listen to me and understand the things that I'm going through. So very much an underrated leadership trait.
Well, and I also love the fact, we're talking in terms of coming out as transgender, but, I've long felt that coming out as transgender and showing that we can live as ourselves, open and honestly, and be okay out there, it just shows other people that they're free and okay to be themselves in any regard that they feel they need to. So it isn't just pertaining to transgender folks. I'm sure it really helps others open up to you about other things.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime someone can express these things about themselves and live authentically as whatever their identity may be, again, that enables that connection, that paves the way for others to feel the same, that if that person can be valued, so can I. And for any of us, whenever we don't have to spend mental energy protecting our identity, that allows us to use that energy to connect, to advance the mission, to focus on what's important, what's in front of us, be that our family, our job, or anything else. A world of possibility opens up when you're no longer protecting your identity.
And what has been the response from your colleagues and higher ups? Have they been supportive of this? Has it, come to their attention, this specific thing?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I have been incredibly lucky in the support that I've received from my leaders and from all the people that I've been able to work with. But I acknowledge a lot of my privilege in that, from being white, when initially coming out, being perceived as male, from being a senior officer within the military, and then also from having a track record of performance. At least in the professional arena, that buys you a lot. And so the experience might be different for a young African American or Latino in the infantry, in the Marines, than it was for me working in a nerdy career field in the Air Force and now Space Force. So Yes, there's been challenge for some, but for me, it's been incredible, and I am so thankful, so lucky for the support that I've received, and from the opportunities that have come my way because I came out, because I've had this authenticity. It's enabled some incredible opportunities.
So you mentioned that the previous administration dropping this transgender ban was a catalyst for you to actually come out, right? I've got the timing on that, right? That was when it was announced or enacted.
So I came out initially as trans during the Obama administration when the ban on transgender service was dropped for the first time.
Was removed.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was when the Trump administration was actually putting the formal ban back into place in March to April of 2019 that kind of put me through this crucible moment where it was transition now or maybe never, or at least while you're serving. Because with the ban going into place, there was a policy that said, unless you had a diagnosis of gender dysphoria prior to this date, the possibility of accessing any gender-related care within the service was gone. Mm-hmm. So that was that moment where I had to do that introspection, and whether the time was right or not, that was my now or never moment. Mm-hmm. And I had always fought against a gender dysphoria diagnosis because though I was trans and I knew it, I never wanted that on my medical record, because as a component of the diagnosis, it says you experience clinically significant distress in work or social situations. Mm-hmm. I never felt that. It wasn't that phrasing, that wording, clinically significant distress, is so wide open. And to me, that's that negative. That's that you're broken. There's a problem. That was never me. And I never wanted that because it could potentially be used against me. Mm-hmm. But I had to bite the bullet at that time again, because if I didn't, I'd lose potential access to any sort of care. And again, I'd be stunting myself as an individual and as a leader. Mm-hmm. So I had to get through that crucible.
So you mentioned, leading up to, discovering that you were trans. Was there anything in particular that cracked your egg?
No, in terms of being trans, something that's always part of me. While that moment may have set the timing of transition, when that began, let's say in earnest, because of external policy, in terms of am I trans? No, that was a development of a lifetime. That was knowing I'm different and just coming to understand it over time, getting the words right, getting the terminology right, and getting the sense of self within me to that point of, now let's do something about the exterior to match where the interior is at.
That's great. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Was there any hesitation once you made that decision that this was the time? Did that realization that, okay, this is really happening now, did that give you any pause, or was there anything else that kind of flooded into your mind that you had to consider and work through?
The only thing that gave me pause was the long-standing fear from my wife about what transition would look like and do to our relationship. Mm-hmm. And whereas it was time, it was the right thing for me, there's still that, what am I doing to you? How does this affect us? And so working through that, while it never, said stop or, you need to take a different direction, it was still that concern and that nagging worry of what does it look like when we get to the other side? How do we move forward as a couple and as spouses?
Mm-hmm. If you're willing to share, what were some of the key takeaways from that? Or what were some of the key conversations that you were able to work through to get through that, to make her feel comfortable and confident that she was along for the ride? This was something that she was going to be part of and not something that was happening to her.
Well, I don't think there was ever anything where I could make her comfortable and confident. That's something where I always say, people should talk to her because she can express that way better than my vision or my understanding of where she was at. Because I give a very one-sided perspective. Even though we did communicate and I understood what her fears may be. And I always hoped that the fears were overblown, that the fears were, worst case scenario type ideas, and that we'd get to a place that was good. But transition wasn't just about me. The world changed for her, both when I came out and then when I transitioned. And the perception of people of her and who she was changed on a dime. So it certainly, again, it wasn't just about me. It was about us, and it was about her all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think let's go ahead and jump into some of that. What was the level of support from your family when you came out? And I know, from that, then that dovetails into the level of support from her family.
Yeah, when I came out, my family was incredibly supportive. And almost nothing but love from my family. I will say it was a little tougher with my dad because it was kind of like I punched him right in the macho. And the what did I do reaction? How did we get to this place? But he's come around. He's fantastic. And the rest of the family has been amazing. When my mom was the first person I told, other than my wife, and her first reaction was, all right, do you want my jewelry when I die? And I'm like, okay, because it's not going to your sister. So she doesn't wear it.
Oh, okay. She's not going to wear it. I thought that was going somewhere very different.
Nope. It was simply, she doesn't wear it. And I'm the oldest, so I guess I get first right of refusal on some of that stuff. But yeah, my family was fantastic. But on Peg's side, she lost friends and family when I came out, over nothing more than who she loved. Her parents didn't speak with her for almost a year. And though they're speaking now and on much better terms, she has other family members and other friends who at the time she considered some of her best that are just gone. So while I got all this love and support, to see her go through some of the negatives was really difficult.
And I mean, that's just so shocking, isn't it? That she honored her wedding vows. She stayed true to you and stuck with you. You were the same person inside that she married, and she honored everything and thus was, next to saintly. And yet she was the one that got all the pushback. That's just crazy to me.
Yeah, it is really wild that, both from family and friends who just like, this doesn't reconcile with my belief system and how can I possibly be friends with you? And you're like, you've been friends with this person all along. She's no different. What changed other than public knowledge of who she loved?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Craziness.
The fact that who she loves is the same person. Like they were on board before. Why is it different now? This again, another tangent I could go off on.
Yeah, a soapbox to stand on and rant all day.
Right. Was there anybody when you came out that supported you in a way or a degree that was more than you expected?
I can't say that there was, because honestly, I had high expectations of my friends and family. My friends are my friends for a reason, and they are good people, and they were amazing. My family, I am lucky to be part of an incredible, warm, loving family, and their support, while not guaranteed, has been at the level where I expected it to be. And again, I am so lucky, so thankful to have it. But it would be hard to point to someone at that point and say, wow, they were someone who I didn't expect to be supportive, and all of a sudden they were. Mm-hmm. I got what I expected in a way, and I'm so lucky and thankful for that. So you are, you're at a decently high rank in the military. I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with the ranks, but I know you're high enough up to where it's substantial. And
you've decided that you're coming out, did you have anybody at that time to turn to or to look to as a role model or a confidant?
So there have been some people that I've definitely looked to, sought counsel of. One of the big ones that I spent some time with was Amanda Simpson, who was a presidential appointee in the Obama administration, was the first trans presidential appointee that came first to the Department of Energy, then to the Department of Defense. She's also an awesome engineer, done a lot of flight tests. So someone I could really look up to that's really accomplished. And, having that caliber of person to be able to talk with and talk about what are some of the professional challenges, you've faced. How are some of the ways you've gone about tackling those things? As well as some of the folks I know that have done well in the military and just sought, their advice. And they didn't have to be trans. They certainly didn't have to be trans, because to me, it's much more about a leadership challenge than anything else. So yeah, there are some great people out there that have helped me along the way.
Was there a key piece of advice that you got that sticks out to you that really helped you?
No, there really hasn't been. I could think back and like, what was it? No. I think it's just an amalgamation simply of being around other people who are authentic and who are themselves, and seeing that and understanding it and doing that learning on your own about not only who you are, but what this means for you as a leader, as an individual, as a member of your family, all those things that you can just kind of absorb by both being part of the community and reading and learning. There's so much out there. And I hope people have these sage bits of advice that just stick with folks. But I have both a terrible memory and just this sense that it was an amalgamation of things.
And what was your experience in coming out specifically at work? What was the response there right when you did it?
So when I came out at work, it was the day and literally the minute the ban on being trans in the military ended. And when that happened, I had an email ready to go to my colleagues in the office, and at the same time also a Facebook post to friends and family, coming out in one big boom, basically. And when the Secretary of Defense finished speaking, announcing the end of the ban, I hesitated because I was nervous about hitting post, hitting send, but I eventually got that courage, did that, and then I ran away. I went down into the bowels of the Pentagon. I found the gym, which is buried underneath it, and I went nowhere faster than I'd ever gone before on an elliptical machine with all the energy that I had of nerves. What's the reaction going to be? But when I got back to my desk, my colleagues walked over one by one. They shook my hand and they said, "It's an honor to serve with you." So I was just floored. And we talked a little bit earlier about, all the privilege I had in that, based on who I was and my record and my contribution to the mission. But still, they went above and beyond in making that gesture. And it was really the reverse of what they said. It was my honor to serve with them.
That's a truly inspiring story, and it's a very inspiring thing to hear that, again, a branch of service that is notorious for being old-fashioned and stuck in their ways, to be that progressive and that supportive is really wonderful to hear.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I think overall, the military is incredibly supportive of trans folks at this point. And again, it's what can you bring to the team? Are you going to contribute and be part of the mission that we're trying to do? Then awesome. Come on in, because we need your brain power.
Our more ethereal question, a little bit of a thinker. What does transition look like or mean to you on a deep level?
It simply means authenticity. It means reaching for your full potential. And I go back to the thought that authenticity, being yourself, really is that ability to reach for the stars. And when we spend that mental energy protecting our identity, that puts this filter in our brains that has to sit in between our thoughts and the words that come out of our mouth or the actions that we take. And when you have that filter in there, no matter how good it is, how fast it is, you're not at your best because you're slowing down just a little bit. You can be good at what you do. You can be great at what you do. You can't be as good as you can be at what you do without that authenticity, without removing that filter, without dedicating your identity protection to self and to mission and to goals.
Mm-hmm. That's very important. And wow. Yeah, it's so interesting to think about that you know, that's where the lack of authenticity comes from, is that filter that we do have to have in place that's always checking what we're saying and making sure it's not divulging something, it's not belying what we're hiding behind.
Right. Is it protecting, where was I on Saturday night, or who was I with, or what was I wearing? Real simple things, or even, pronouns in terms of your spouse and getting that type of thing right. So yeah, all sorts of things that you might not think are much, but they add up to something, and they're always limiting in some way or another.
That fully explains the amount of stress that we feel as trans people, and that builds to our eventual coming out. We're just basically explode, and we just have to, because we can't take it anymore. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I think, how for trans folks in particular, but for LGBT folks in general, LGBTQ folks certainly, how coming out isn't always the big boom, or it isn't the boom and then you're done. It is just this continual process. And again, it's, who were you with? What are your spouse's pronouns? And for trans folks, it's interesting that I out myself when I'm talking with folks at work, and they're like, "Oh, you have a wife?" I'm like, "Okay, yes. Now you know that, I'm in a lesbian relationship." But they're like, "Oh, how long have you been married?" "Well, I've been married 17 years. Well, wait, was gay marriage legal back then? I'm like, well, no, but so, I mean, you get to these simple situations that out you no matter where the conversation is going, even if it's totally casual.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Just something we have to look forward to dealing with forever. So, after that general question of what transition means, how far do you feel you are in your process of transition?
I don't even know that that's relevant. It's all about, are you your best self, to me? And I absolutely think that I am, or I'm striving towards it. And so where that means I am now in terms of physical things, I hesitate to put that point on a map at all. As in, as long as you're moving forward to being your best authentic self, the rest, kind of falls to the wayside to me.
As you were on the precipice of coming out, did you have a set of goals or a plan in mind? And has that changed or shifted as you've moved along?
I think most of my goals were simply about, again, reaching my potential as an individual, as an advocate, as a leader, as a member of the teams that I was part of. So it really wasn't a plan of, I need to do X, Y, Z. It's just simply, how do we move forward? How do we keep the ball moving as an individual and as a team to get better, to be better, to do better?
That's so great to hear. As you moved along, what were the key fears that you ran up against, and how did you overcome those?
So I think that the fears we touched on briefly was really about, relationship issues, and how might this affect my wife? How might this affect the kids? And how do we work through some of those things in the most positive way possible? But I am so lucky and so privileged that I never had fear of me. I never had fear of what people's reaction is going to be to me. And that is so dependent on my position in life, my socioeconomic status, and the color of my skin.
Mm-hmm. So with the incredibly positive attitude that you have, and your focus on just being your best and most authentic self, do you struggle with any forms of dysphoria, and what are those?
There's that general, I don't feel so great today. You can still see things in yourself that aren't ideal, but it's not something that I ruminate over, that I like to think that I struggle with, because it's not important to me. There are all sorts of things I could do. I know I could look a lot better, but not my focus. I have so many other things going on that internal stuff is never something that I tend to get hung up on. And a lot of it is just personality, that I am not a worrier. I do not, hold something and let it build or ruminate on it for hours or days. Like, what's next? What's the next cool thing I have? What are all these opportunities? So my problem tends to be more of the bing, bing, bing of, oh, I could do that. I could do that. We can do this. Let's do that. And just thinking of all the neat things that we can do or should be doing and trying to work towards that, rather than, oh, this sucks. It's just, I have this very positive, forward-looking attitude, and so many cool things that I want to do that I can't spend time on any of those things that might just hold me back.
Oh, very interesting. See, I find that I've got a lot of that chaotic energy, either the ping pong ball or the pinball kind of a thing, or the shiny thing. But
what's that notification that just popped in? What's that email? Yeah.
But I still seem to find time for the self-consciousness and dysphoric moments and things like that. So with a lack of that for you, do you still find a need to, or do you have any kind of routine or things that you do to feel and find validation in yourself, in your trans identity?
The validation that I get is from the work that I do, not the me that I present to the world. There is nothing that makes me feel better than getting a call or an email from someone that I've served with, particularly people that are now in leadership positions of their own, and they say, I've got a trans airman in my unit, or I have a trans soldier working for me. How do I support them? That's validation. Mm-hmm. That's winning, because that's the opportunity to set culture, to develop it, and to help them help their folks reach their full potential. And knowing that if they can do that, the people that they help are going to go to the ends of the earth for this leader that provided such a supportive environment. So very little could be more rewarding than the work we're doing from an individual education advocacy and a public policy advocacy standpoint for me.
That's amazing. I think, chat, we've officially found the new transverse role model. We can forget all others and just focus on Bree now, because that is so inspiring and such a great outlook on things. And yeah, I'm definitely going to take that to heart. And, I've been trying to focus on that, but it seems like I've still been able to find that space to focus a little too much on myself and my own worry. I'm going to try and move past that. That's great advice.
Yeah, and it's great for me, the other validating thing is seeing some of the other heroes that are out there doing incredible things. There are a couple service members I know that, really embody that attitude of, I'm doing this to make it easier for the people that follow me. I know I'm going through all sorts of terrible things. I'm hopping over hurdles, and it sucks. But if I don't do it, who will? And if I don't raise a stink and advocate for better policy, who will? And then if I can persevere and get through it, the other person coming up 3 years later is going to have such an easier time because we've blazed the trail. So trailblazer is a word that I love because it's not about seeing how far you can go, how high you can get. It's about creating the path that others can follow, and it's so much easier for them to go down so that when you're done, they can go further.
Mm-hmm. What were some of those key hurdles that you found in your pathway?
For me, it's been mostly about being educated, being in the right places at the right times, and really getting into the rooms and the places where decisions are happening. The hurdle has always been, policy being developed about us, without us, and trying to knock down those doors to say, listen to the lived experience of the people who are going through this policy and have to work with it, instead of just developing this idea of who and what trans people are and who and what trans people are going through without ever talking to trans people or getting them involved in the decision-making process. So that's the big hurdle for me, is just opening the doors, making those connections with decision makers within the Department of Defense, on Capitol Hill, or anywhere else that are making or discussing policy without us.
So one of your biggest hurdles has just been breaking through with common sense?
It's about finding those pathways, finding those closed doors, and what's the trick to open it? Is it a key that I need? Is it a sledgehammer to just knock it open? What is the leverage I have to open that door so we can have a conversation?
And do you feel that your position as Lieutenant Colonel has really made some of those hurdles easier to knock down or get over?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's all relative. My position and my rank as a lieutenant colonel means something in some places, and in others it's like, well, you're a nobody. Unless you have general stars or admiral stars on your shoulders, or you're in a certain type of role, you're just getting coffee for others. So. Yes, it makes a difference. It really does. It opens doors for me, and it has made my journey within the military so much easier than some of our junior enlisted personnel that have 6 or 7 different layers of supervision to get through to get an approval on a transition-related step in their journey, where I can just walk into my boss's office and say, "Sir, ma'am, sign this." And they're like, "You got it." So my privilege and the rank having its privilege in that is incredible. But in some policymaking circles, I'm a middle manager at best. And it's tough, to figure out, again, what's the lever I use? If it's not my rank, what is it? Is it the story? Is it that I'm a constituent, that I'm an advocate, that I'm president of an advocacy organization? What hat do I wear to make the most difference in any given situation?
That's so perfect. I'm going to go ahead and try and wrap up, and skip over some of these, because there's so many other questions about what you do outside of your story that I want to get to, and there's a lot coming in from chat. You mentioned already that there's a lot you feel you've been able to accomplish because of your transition. What are some of the things that you're most proud of in that specific arena?
Well, I'd like to think, and I'm pretty sure this is true, that I was the first trans person in the Department of Defense, or certainly in the military, hired for a position because I was trans, which is kind of cool. That I got a job as an executive officer to a 2-star general because I explained, like, the week after the ban was dropped, all sorts of things about, well, what does this mean? What does policy mean? How do we support people? And a week later, he said, would you like to be my exec? Which is a great developmental position because you can learn from someone who's several levels or more above you in the military. So that was kind of a cool accomplishment. But what I tend to be most proud of are the accomplishments we've made in aggregate, and particularly getting back to an era of open policy, getting through the years after Trump tweeted that we were a burden on the military service, and getting back now to open service where everyone can be authentic and who they are and access medical care. That's huge. And getting through there while supporting thousands of transgender service members, not losing anyone to suicide or depression at that time, keeping so many of them in the military and fighting for a better future. That's huge. And it could have been that way without me. But collectively, I am so proud of what we've accomplished and the resilience that transgender service members have shown in getting back to this point, despite the huge psychological burdens that were on them then, and some that still exist today, knowing that a future administration could flip the switch and go right back to an institutionalized policy of discrimination.
What is your favorite thing that you've learned, either externally or about yourself, throughout your journey?
Well, that's a difficult question and not something I've reflected on. I think it has to do with the depth of connection that can come from authenticity and vulnerability, as that we came out before. I wrote an article about leadership lessons learned shortly after I transitioned and had my first couple of months on the job as my authentic self. Again, while in a command position, and the things that basically opened my eyes, the blinders that were removed to some of the problems and challenges other people were facing. And again, that connection that we were able to build so that we could work on and solve those issues, or at least help, try and mitigate it, or even just have that ear to listen to someone that might not have been there before. So the blinders that were removed, and the openness that I've continued to develop to new ideas, new perspectives, and the understanding of intersectional identities, it's been a learning experience all along.
That's so wonderful. And as we close up this section, the big question we like to ask all of our guests, what is the key piece or pieces of advice that you have to give to young or closeted trans folks out there?
Again, a really tough question because it's so individualized based on someone's circumstances. I would never say that I have a better idea of what someone else should do than that person does. But I'd just like to offer up that there is a world of possibility out there for trans people. You can be valued, you can be loved, you can be who you are, and you can reach for your best self through authenticity, wherever you are, in terms of either a transition or just your gender identity, your sexuality. Anywhere on the spectrum is valid, and it's an important place for all of us to understand that. Our journeys are our own, but seek out and find those friends and allies, or even just those people willing to listen and revel in it.